You're listening to Conversations That Matter with your host, Terry Conrad.
Hi, everybody. This is Terry Conrad, and this is Conversations That Matter. And again, I am deeply honored to welcome my very good friend, my mentor, visionary, leader in the industry, Jeff Turner, president of Real Satisfied. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us.
Can they see me blushing?
I highly doubt you're blushing. You hear much better than that from better people all the time. So there you go.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I'm so excited. I want to give a bit of a backstory about how we've even come to know each other, because I think it really speaks to our shared passion, which was back in the day. I must have been.
I love it when people say that. Back in the day.
Only old people say that, I think. Anyway.
Well, it sounds like it was 30 years ago.
It kind of feels like it was a while ago. So I don't know, probably 6-7 years ago, I was trolling Active Rain, and a place that I have forgotten about, frankly, and I've been reminded to go and revisit it. But anyway, the point is I came across this wonderful article, and it was talking specifically about values. And it was written in such a way that I was so completely inspired. I'm like, who is this person? And I went on this deep dig. And of course, you were the author of that article and many others like it. And I've always been attracted to your vision, your value system, and everything that you stand for. Do you remember some of those articles back then?
I do. I think it started out with me wanting to expose, because years ago, I have a whole other life before I migrated into the real estate industry. And a company that I sold in 1999, I still look back on the experience of running that company as the best work experience I've ever had in my life. Growing it from, just me sitting at a kitchen table in 1985 to the largest pre-press production company for the newspaper industry in the country. I mean, it was just this wonderful experience. And even to this day, there is a Facebook group that was started by a former employee called "I used to work at a place called Ad Out." And it's filled with former employees, and they gather together, they go bowling, they continue to meet up, and the vast majority of them continue to say it was an experience that changed my life. And it started with a codification of what our vision was and a clear articulation of what our values were. And the man to help me do that was named Bill Leiter. And so the first article that I wrote on Active Rain was really about the value of a mentor who shares your values and who can pull the best from you. Someone who can call bullshit when you're just playing games.
Right.
And for a number of years, we worked together where he was really a consultant that was helping me get down on paper all the different systems and processes that we use to build these newspaper ads. And we were exceptional at it. I can say without hesitation, nobody in the world built these ads faster, better, less errors, more efficiently than we did. It was the reason why the newspaper industry was so attracted to us. But that came as a result of a belief in a certain way of doing things, not just process, but people. The value of the human being inside of that environment, and the necessity for everyone to communicate with each other in a way that honored these people, right? Before it was even codified, it was just sort of there. The writing down of the values only intensified it and made it more powerful. The values were always there. And so that's what was the genesis of my writing that first article in Active Rain. It was my trying to communicate with this new group of people who really didn't know me. What am I about? When I'm talking about these things, what's the context? What's the background that brings me to this place? And where am I getting whatever authority, whatever you want to call it, that I'm hoisting upon the world with the writing? What's it based on?
Right.
It's not just based on fluff. It's based upon watching something grow to the place that, eventually I was managing several thousand employees and, doing some things that I'm very, very, very proud of.
Right.
Very proud of. That most people have no idea, because their only experience of me in this, new media internet world is the real estate focused Jeff, right?
Right. I think that is true, but I also think that whether they know it or not, whether we have the full history of you or not, every time you speak, there is something clearly evident that you have this rich, deeper understanding that some of us, I think, and that's why you are such a thought leader and such a mentor to so many of us, which is you clearly, just the way that you articulated that little backstory of how you've come to be here, says to me that you understand the importance of knowing what you even think, how to share that experience in a way that inspires others and rattles them to the point where they're like, they want to dig deeper.
Well, I'm from West Virginia, so, we're storytellers. That's what we do.
Right.
I think the thing, so there are a couple of things you said. I'm not sure I know exactly what a thought leader is. Mm-hmm. I'm never put off when somebody tells me that I am. But I'm not sure exactly what that means, So thank you. But I don't know that I fully understand the scope of what that is. So the objective, my objective, has always focused on simply clearly articulating what I believe has value and what I don't believe has value. Period. That's it. There isn't some higher
mission.
There's no. I don't sit down and go, man, this is a thought leader post. I think this one will solidify my position as a thought leader. Yeah.
I do every day. It's like, oh, please,
every
God.
day. Yeah.
Please, God.
Yeah. Please, God, help me be a thought leader.
Exactly.
Yeah. No.
So. Okay, let's go back. So tell me a little bit more. So we got to that place where, because this is what I think is really interesting. People do want to know the person behind all the thought leadership. And we want to know, I think, that your history is interesting. It's like, where did you come from? How did you get to that place where you were so clear about your values and why that was so meaningful to you, and enough that you felt the need to share that?
Well, so I believe that values always have power. So we're all driven by our values. We can't not live our values. Our values are our actions. They're not our words. We can say anything we want, how we live, what we do. That ultimately is what happens. Except that people whose words and actions align are simply more powerful. Mm-hmm. They just are. There's a palpable form of energy that exists around someone who, when you meet them, they are what they said they were, mm-hmm. both in word and deed, period. And it doesn't matter whether it's a Donald Trump whose value system I don't necessarily agree with, but my bet is that when you meet him, his words and actions align. You're not going to be surprised if he migrates towards a self-gratifying form of conversation and behavior.
Right.
And again, doesn't make him right, wrong, otherwise, but he derives his power ultimately mm-hmm. from those things being aligned.
Absolutely.
Knowing it clearly, living it clearly. And so, since I know that's true of individuals, and you can feel it when you're in their presence, you can sense it. You're at a party with someone, somebody who listens to you intently, makes eye contact, gives you attention, all of the stuff, all of the nuances of human communication that go into creating that sense that this is somebody I want to spend time with, this is somebody I want to know, this is somebody I would follow, this is a leader, whatever. All of those same things are true inside of an organization. So I know for a fact that an organization that has a clearly articulated vision that's real, mm-hmm. and clearly articulated values that they actually live has more power than a company that either has not fully articulated those values, or whose values, the articulated ones, the signs on the wall, don't align with the actions of the leaders, and therefore never align with the actions of the people who are following the leaders. Yep. So those companies achieve higher results. They are more profitable. I mean, they have higher levels of customer satisfaction. These things are not debatable. Every Harvard Business Review writes about this stuff. You know, this isn't fluffy California psychology crap. That's
exactly
real.
That's exactly what I was going to say, which is like, every time I talk about this piece of and that's the foundational piece when we work with clients building their brands, is it's like selling that piece though, and convincing people that it isn't fluff. This is foundational stuff here. You can't possibly build anything if you don't know what you stand for, and you're not prepared to, like you say, live it by example to your people.
Well, and we make assumptions that are just inaccurate. And I'm going to give you an example that goes back in history again, because I think it's powerful. When I went to codify the company's values, the ones that were in existence, I did it as a preparation for the company being sold, because I knew when this little company was engulfed by this larger public company, that there was a high potential that the culture of this larger company would overwhelm whatever our culture was.
Right.
And we'd lose that. We'd lose that strength. And so I spent a weekend, in a retreat, just Bill and I, alone. And it was grueling. It was this. He'd say, I'd say what I thought was one of my values. He goes, "That's not one of your values." I go, "What do you mean it's not? What do you mean it's not one of my values?" It's not one of your values because blah blah blah. I go, "Oh, I guess you're right. It isn't one of my values." He goes, "This is one of your values. Let me give you an example of what one of your values are." And he'd give me an example, and I'd say, "Yeah." And he goes, "And in the business workplace, this is one of the ones that actually drives the behavior of employees more than others." And so this process of getting past the crap, getting past what I want, the aspirational aspects of what I would like to believe about myself, or the aspirational aspects of what I would like the company to be, is not the point. It's not about the aspiration. It's about the reality. What's the reality? What can you consistently do every single day without having to think about it? What are those things that you do when the lights are off, when no one's watching? Whether they're good or bad, those are the things that are you. They are your company. They are the power. And he told me when we got to the end of the process, I'll never forget this. And it was a very emotional experience for me. He said, "I need you to understand that what you've done here is really powerful, but you're going to be surprised by who is not going to want to live these values." And so I went that next week, gathered together all of the leaders in our company, and I said, "Guys, here's the way we're going to live. Here's the vision. Here are the values." And Bill sort of fed me the words to say, because I didn't feel like I needed to say them. I didn't feel like it was necessary. I believe that, especially my two partners that I'd known since college, we went to the same college, we'd known each other for years. I believed we shared these values. I said, "If you are not prepared to live any one of these values, I'd like your resignation on my desk tomorrow morning."
Whew.
Right?
Yep.
One of my partners handed in his resignation the next morning, and the value that he had a problem with was this one. One of our values was, we value ideas, all ideas. There are no bad ideas, right? And as a result, we value the person sharing the idea. Therefore, these kinds of reactions to ideas are unacceptable. And part of his resignation, when he walked in and laid on the desk, he said, "I don't value all ideas. Some of these people are idiots." Okay, now, and I love this man. He's brilliant. He's a fabulous human being. We share so many other values. That one we don't.
Interesting.
And what I learned after his resignation was that there were all of these really amazing ideas that were being suppressed because they'd reach that desk.
Interesting.
And they'd stop. They never surfaced. And so that to me, the power of these clearly articulated values puts in place a mechanism for communication among people that allows everyone to feel comfortable, that allows everyone to know that if I act this way, this is how everyone else is going to act. The biggest problem that I see in organizations is that we call it politics because we don't have a lack of word for it, but politics exists because people don't trust.
Right.
Politics exists because they feel like they have to find ways around the
Maneuvering.
channels of communication to maneuver. And so when politics exists inside an organization, it's almost certainly a result of misaligned values.
Totally. So I have two thoughts. One is I would love for you to share, because I know Bill, your mentor, your old partner, has gone on to write the book Brand Delusions, which you sent me a copy of and I loved. And I'd love to touch on that a little bit, but I'd also like to hear how you think that this kind of thinking and this kind of culture building and value-driven companies can work inside of real estate that is structured so differently than the corporate world.
Yeah, I'll do that. Bill wrote the book Brand Delusions. It's an interesting book because it's written like a novel, I guess. It's a story, right? So this businessman falls asleep and he wakes up and there's this guy from the future,
right?
Basically. They're helping him through the problems with his business. And I won't divulge the whole story. And some people like those kinds of books, the stories, and some people don't, but I think it's very well written. The main character in the book, and I don't know that Bill would ever admit this, but the main character in the book, the consultant, the guy from the future, is actually Bill.
Sure.
And what's interesting is I participated in the review of every word that was written in that book. So when he'd finish a chapter, he'd send it over to me. I'd send it back and say, no, these people aren't believable. These aren't real. Every story, every person in that book, I know who that human being is. I know exactly who he's writing about. I know exactly the company he's writing about. So this fictional company in this book is actually an amalgamation of multiple companies and multiple experiences, all sort of wrapped up into one to teach a lesson about how values impact each area of an organization. How it weaves itself together and where the ultimate power comes from. And I think it did a good job of showing the process. What's the process you need to go through as an organization to move from a company that is not values driven, although driven by values, just not a codified set of values, and a company that is truly values driven. And the myth that values have something to do with ethics. They don't. They have nothing to do with ethics. That we align either it's good or bad. Right. That there needs to be an aspirational quality to values. There doesn't. There just needs to be a truth. Period. So anyway, the book is that, and
there's a quote. There's a quote that you've repeated over and over and over and over and over again. It's been beaten into my head. Why don't you share it? I had it right here.
Relative to brand?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like the brand is like, we have always, of course, thought that brand is the logo, the tagline, all of these things, and of course, we're learning, and I think people are starting to understand that it's so much more.
Well, and now you've asked me in this moment, and I've shared it like 10 billion times. So, it's in my brain, and I can't pull it out right here. So
brand
this is how you know when these conversations are live.
The experience of it's what you deliver and
your
how you
brand
deliver.
is a commonly held set of beliefs about what you deliver and how you deliver.
There you go.
As validated by the experience of your customers, as validated by the experience of everybody you touch, everybody you meet. There are no insignificant conversations, there are no insignificant actions, and so that's the basis for everything I believe to be true about the power of it, because ultimately those things become your brand.
Right.
So people, fuss and do all of this stuff over the look of their website and their logo and the colors and blah, 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 blah. And ultimately those things take on the values. They take on, the brand becomes the accumulation of the actions of the people associated with the brand. The brand logo is a symbol.
Yes.
It will call to mind whatever those actions are.
Exactly.
The Apple logo is powerful not because it's such a beautiful logo. It's actually kind of a stupid logo. But it has achieved power. Its power comes from the actions of all of the people associated with the brand and the experience of the people with that brand. Doesn't have anything to do with any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
It all rolls up and becomes one.
I agree. So now let's take that into how does this work inside the real estate world when we have like these multiple levels of organizations? And you, of course, are working in Real Satisfied, and your company's whole mission is to improve the industry, is my take on it anyway. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about Real Satisfied, about brand inside of real estate?
Sure. So I like to say I discovered Real Satisfied, kind of like Columbus discovered America.
Yeah.
I discovered Real Satisfied on a speaking trip to Australia in May of 2011, and it was their first foray into marketing into the real estate industry. They had been a research company for a decade or more, and decided they wanted to develop a product for a vertical, and they chose the real estate industry. Their logo was plastered behind my head as part of this sort of internet radio program that is hosted by a guy named Kevin Turner, no relation to me. And so afterwards, I saw them, little black shirts, little Real Satisfied logo sitting on their collars, and said, "Show me your product. I've never heard of you guys." And so they whipped out an iPad and started showing me around this database, this back end, this broker dashboard, where all of the data collected from the surveys was rolled up into these really nice reports. There was no public facing front to it. There was no agent profile page. They had no understanding whatsoever of the hype around agent ratings and reviews in the United States, completely unaware of what was happening at the Houston Association of Realtors. They were in Australia. They were doing their thing. And the real estate industry is slightly different in Australia. There's only seller side, there's no buyer side. Lots of agents in Australia are actually employees. Heavy focus on property management as a wealth creation tool for brokers. So that environment had them create this product where it was a broker tool. That's it. Designed to understand, are we delivering on our promise or not? Do we do what we say we do or not? There was no objective to create an agent rating system. There was no objective to create some agent comparison site. The money that was made then and the money that's made now at Real Satisfied is as a service. Our job is to collect as much information as possible about how an agent performed for a client inside of that transaction. And the public-facing profiles that exist today only came about after we launched in the United States. We launched in the US without public-facing profiles. They exist because brokers asked us to make them exist. They needed a way to validate that what was being collected for them was happening as a result of a third party, and as a way to point to, this is real, these reviews, these comments. And so the objective of Real Satisfied is today what it was then. How do you collect as much information as possible about the experience of a client with that broker, that brand, that agent, and do it in a way that provides a high level of detail, not a net promoter score, would you recommend me, because that's a part of it, because you don't learn anything from that.
Right.
You don't learn anything from asking 2 questions about performance.
So I was going to just ask, what are we trying to learn? What is the typical broker wanting to learn from these surveys?
Right, and here's what they learn from the survey. So I'll give you an example. The seller survey has 49 data points.
Yeah, wow.
There are 13 different performance measures that are addressed in the survey. So it's not just, did they do a good job? It's, how did they do in the sales planning? How did they do in the negotiation? How did they do during escrow? How did they do? So that it's getting to the detail. And what's interesting is a client can be unhappy with one aspect of what took place during the transaction. So for example, they may be unhappy with the communication process during the escrow and very happy with every other aspect of what took place.
Right.
So what you're getting to is this granular understanding. Where did I fall down? Not did I do a good job? Because that could be heavily influenced by a single aspect of communication that took place. And when you're presented with the opportunity Do I give them a 5 or do I give them a 4? Do I give them 100% or do I give them 80%?
Right.
If there's one aspect of it I wasn't happy with, but I was happy with everything else, I'm tempted to just give you a 4.
Yeah.
Or I'm tempted to just move on and hit 5 because I can't be bothered.
Right.
But when you're presented with that level of detail, what we see is, one, clients do want to give that level of detail. Our surveys are long. We never apologize for it. The red herring we get is these surveys are so long, my clients are never going to fill these out.
Right.
But the data doesn't support it.
Interesting.
Almost 90% of people who start our survey finish our survey. So you can't tell how long the survey is until you start it.
Right.
So people just don't drop out of the survey. I think people don't, and when I say people, even inside the real estate industry, don't give as much value to how important that transaction is to the consumer as the consumer does.
Right.
I think people this notion that ratings and reviews should compare to what takes place in the restaurant industry, or that it should take place. Those transactions don't even compare in importance and value. And so the amount of detail that you would like to collect from the consumer, you get one shot. Mm-hmm. At the end of a transaction, you get one shot. They're not going to fill out multiple surveys. They're not going to do it multiple times. You get one shot to learn as much as you can about whether or not you did a good job. And we do the best job of that. And our clients and their responses to what we do, I think they're sending back the message, yes, you do the best job of that.
So this is Conversations That Matter. Tell me why this matters in our industry so much.
Well, it matters because it's not enough to just simply ask the question, would you recommend me? It matters. It's not about, the focus is on getting ratings and reviews to what end, so that I can get more leads.
Right.
It matters because ultimately the win is if you can understand whether or not you truly did keep your promise. And if you didn't, where you didn't. And if you didn't, how do you improve it very specifically? See, this is a conversation that matters because ultimately the value of this data is in improving the real estate industry. It's not in getting more leads, because the myth that sits out there is that the internet is somehow this vast treasure trove of these, unwashed masses of real estate consumer who are wandering around hopeless, looking for an agent, and the only way to find them is to go to Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com and go search for an agent.
So true.
It's just not true.
Yeah.
I mean, Brian Borrero wrote a little rant 2 weeks ago that I thought was hilarious. Hold on, let me just find it real quick, because it's short and it's poignant.
From 1000 Watt, one of my favorite companies.
From 1000 Watt. Mm-hmm. Oh, come on, let me get to it. Talk and say something so that this doesn't get boring.
Well, I was just going to say,
or we can both be quiet and you can edit out. You can edit out. I've got it right here. I've got it right here. Hold on. File, open recent. So here's the entirety of what he said. Something I've been thinking about. Only about 10% of all buyer and seller leads are generated online through portals. Those portal leads, minus the first-time home buyers, were all, at some point, some broker or agent's client, a client that got away. Yep. You want to kill the portals, and I'm not saying you should or they need to be or any of that. He likes being provocative. You want to kill the portals? Get better at post-close marketing. If you're good at that, you'll stop feeding the lead machine.
Amen.
And so here's my thing, right? I believe that the holy grail for online real estate portals is to somehow change consumer behavior around how they select an agent. And they'll do that if agents continue to bite on this myth that they should collect customer ratings the same way a restaurant does.
Okay, so that's actually a really big idea. And I think that let's stop there for a second, because the way that a restaurant collects their reviews is, sometimes often they're not asking for it. It just happens because they got or they didn't get great service. Right. And oftentimes the people who take the time to post it's right on the heels of a crap experience. So you're getting the nasties, and I don't know that that's, that is not a...
But here's the other thing. The restaurant owner has the ability to control almost every aspect of that customer experience.
Right.
right? So I come to a restaurant to do what? I come to eat. I come because I'm hungry. I come because whatever. I pick certain restaurants I pick the restaurant based upon my mood.
Yeah.
So a restaurant can almost even predict that, but they control the environment, they control the lighting, they control the wait staff, they control the quality of the food, they control the temperature of the food. They have the ability to control everything. A real estate agent does not.
Right.
I mean, the exact same, there is no exact same real estate transaction. I may come at the real estate action having just come off a divorce, my credit is in crappy position, my emotional state is trashed. I may come to the real estate transaction. My spouse just died. I don't want to sell my house. I have to sell my house.
Yeah.
I may come to the real estate transaction with all cash. I may come to the real estate the variables that are involved, the number of details and pieces that are outside of agent control and only possible through agent influence are huge. And so when I go and look at somebody who makes a comment or rates somebody 4 stars, what the hell is the context of that transaction?
Totally. Context.
What is the context of that transaction? And so while a rating is a byproduct of what we do and a recommendation is a byproduct of what we do is ask very detailed questions about agent performance. And the objective is, let's really understand what took place. How did they really feel about this? And the vast, vast, vast majority of the time, they feel pretty good about the vast majority of what takes place in the transaction. And it's something that took place that just sticks in their head. And that's what we uncover.
That's positive.
And that's the goal of what we're trying to do.
So here's a follow-up question to that then. Are you seeing your clients, mostly I'm guessing brokers associations, are you seeing them take this information and what are they doing with it that's positive?
Yeah, and this is the thing. I had, and I won't name this person, but a large brand who was considering using us sought me out at the T3 conference, and he walked up to me and said hello, and he said, "Man, you guys are killing it." I said, "Yeah, when are we going to get a shot to talk to you again?" He goes, "You're working with too many of my customers." And I said, "Do you give that same response to Zillow?"
Yeah.
I go, "Please don't tell me you think it's the tool that differentiates one company from another." And I guess the point is some brokers do a really good job of looking at that data and educating their agents and using it as a mechanism for training and learning, and some don't.
Amen. Yep. And that's up to you guys, for sure.
Right. I don't. All I can do, the best that we can do at Real Satisfied, is do the very best job we can of ensuring that the highest number of people possible complete one of those surveys. And we do a really good job of it.
Yep.
Close to 50% of people who get sent one of our surveys fill it out. That is a mind-boggling number, and it's been consistent from the get-go.
Wow.
Doesn't matter how much we grow, that number stays consistent.
That's very impressive. So, I'm a big believer in what you do. I think it's a great company. I know the guys, Phil and David. And
thanks.
I think it matters. And you said it before, and it bears repeating because this is something I'm really passionate about. I even have this in one of my bios, which is I want to improve the brand of the entire industry. And that's what I think Real Satisfied is doing, quite frankly. And so it's a breath of fresh air to see. And I think actually you're opening the eyes and connecting us all. Like, this is sort of that, if we were one giant corporation, these are the threads that tie us together, and we can work on those things to create a better brand, I think.
I think so. I think quite frankly, the vast majority of the leaders in the real estate industry get this. I really do. And I think we can all be enticed by the sexiness of certain aspects of what takes place in the industry. And I think agents also get hung up on, the way things are presented from stages at conferences and things. And quite frankly, it's actually a small number of people. But that confusion around what's really important, what's really valuable, has an impact on the industry. And I think clarity around this is important.
I agree. I wrote a post back in the day. I've said this 1,000 times, but I talked about, we're so busy. This is weird living in a metrics focused world right now, right? Like everything has to show ROI, everything has to show reach and depth and like all the rest of it. And what I've been noticing is we have stepped away from the things that I think matter even more, which are the things you can't necessarily measure, which is,
Right.
values, character of a man, the importance of family, like all of those things and how they play into, because I think we do this really bizarre thing, which is we live our work life over here and then we compartmentalize and we live our life over here. But the truth is they go together. And so are we remembering to measure that other stuff? And I think Real Satisfied does a pretty good job of tying those pieces together.
Well, I don't know whether we do or not. I know that the other section, the other largest section of questions is really about the agents, who they are.
Yeah.
Rate their honesty, rate their communication skills, rate their trustworthiness, rate their so there's all these other things that are. And what's interesting to see, we had a broker who came to us. We launched with the entire Century 21 platform in January,
which looks great, by the way.
It's going fabulous.
Yeah.
And they've done surveys for a long time, and our surveys are more detailed than their older surveys. Mm-hmm. And so the broker came and said, "Listen, I have an agent who's always achieved really, really high percentages on their surveys. I think there's something wrong with your surveys because their first 3 surveys came back and man, they're lower than they were before." Mm. And I said, "Well, have you logged into your dashboard and taken a look at the detail of what's included?" He goes, "No, I haven't." I said, "Well, let's go do that." So we went and dove in. Long story short, one client, a client he knew, a builder, rated this agent really high on he liked her. Mm-hmm. It was clear. I love her. Not happy with how she's performing in the actual work that's taking place. And his response was this sort of aha moment, like, all I ever get from him is positive feedback about her, but man, it's clear. I mean, this guy went out of his way, and in the comments, he even put specifics about what was not going wrong. I like her, but boom. And so he said, I've got to go talk to him. And I need to go talk to her. Yeah. It's this aha moment. It wasn't oh crap, I'm going to have to go fire the agent, because that's not how you talked about it before in the real estate environment. The fire the agent mentality when they're a 1099 employee is kind of foreign. But I often don't choose to work with 1099 employees who are associated with the companies I work with because of their performance or my understanding of whether or not they actually live the values. They still represent me. They still do that. But the response, and the overwhelming response we see from brokers, is not, oh, I need to get rid of that agent. It's, I need to go help that agent. That's the response we're looking for. The goal here, and this is why I think people gravitate towards the details, that the detail does the dirty work. Mm-hmm. You don't have to make assumptions. If there's enough detail, the detail does the dirty work for you. So the dirty work part of it, of uncovering it, is done. Your job now is to simply go and communicate around something that's already been uncovered. That's actually the easy part.
So I think we're getting close here. I think the idea that the context, how we communicate, access to information, details that tell the true story about what's really going on is sort of, how we're going to tie this all together and how that will elevate the entire brand of the entire industry. I believe in the work that you're doing. I believe in you, and the man, the family, everything else. Keep writing, keep sharing your thought leadership with us.
I should probably write more often now that you've called me. I've never written in a year.
Yeah, it's time. It's definitely time.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway,
maybe.
I wanted...
Probably not.
Well, you can do more of these. This is fine. Conversations that matter are good too. I'm inspired. I am inspired. And I do think it's worth having these conversations, because I think a lot of us, we see sort of what's going on the surface, but we don't really know what's going on underneath it all. And that's why we do this, is so we can kind of learn a little bit more about why you do what you do, why that matters to you, why it matters to the industry. So thank you so much for sharing that.
That's my pleasure. Always.
All right, we'll have to do this again.
Thanks for a conversation that matters.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Conversations That Matter with your host, Terry Conrad.